Hello, welcome to another video in the series on Centos Web Panel. In the last video, we covered the security aspects by changing our SSH port. So in this video, we'll quickly look at how we can transform our IP address into a domain name that we can use to access our server, because remembering your IP address all the time may not be something that is very convenient. Okay, you don't want to start looking for your IP address and start typing your IP address in order to access your server. So you want to transform that into a domain name that you can easily remember. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to log into the admin area. That's the administrative area, the root. I'm going to log into the root account. Then also I'm going to log into the primary domain. So when you start working with Centos Web Panel, remember you have two separate account types. Now the first account type is the root account. That's where you carry out all your administrative functions. Everything we've been doing so far up till now has happened in that root account. Now the other account is the account that is for each domain name that you host. So let's assume you have 10 domains and you have hosted 10 domains on your Centos Web Panel. It means automatically that you're going to have 10 separate accounts, and each account will function independently. So when you want to log into each of those 10 accounts, you have to log into those accounts using the end user panel, where you have the administrative functions for each of those accounts. Don't forget that Centos Web Panel is designed as a multi-user platform. So you don't want to give, for instance, if you have clients, you don't want to give your clients access to the admin area of your Centos Web Panel. So what we are going to do now is that we are going to start our configuration from the root account area. So what I'm going to do quickly is that I'm just going to get the IP address to that server, and we're just going to go to 2030. That's so we just go the IP address :2030, and that should take us to the admin area. At the same time, I'm going to just go to the control panel for the user. So this is the root area. Now if I want to go to the control panel for the user, remember in this video we used a primary domain. So there would be one domain that is your primary domain. So let's assume you have like 300 domain names on your server. One of those domains will be your main domain. That's your primary domain. So for this account now, the first domain that we added is the mojoschool.club domain, which is our primary domain. So what we want to do with this primary domain is that we want to go to the cpanel of that domain. So you know there's a difference between your root account. Let me just go to the cpanel of this domain. So there's a difference between your root, that's the admin area, and the cpanel. So if you go to the cpanel, you see it goes to the IP address and it goes to 2083. So 2083 goes to your cpanel, but you don't need to remember the IP address. All you just need to do is just type the domain name mojoschool.club, and after you type the domain name, just go to /cpanel and it will take you to the end user cpanel. That's for each user account. Now when you come here, you want to log in as your root. Okay, so what we are going to do now is that we are going to log in as the root of this account, and we'll just go to, let me just grab the password to that root account. So we'll just grab the password to the root account, and then we log into that root account. So our goal right now is to change this IP address to a domain. So what we are going to do now is that we are just going to copy this IP address here, and we'll just go down here, and under host name, we want to change this host name. Now when you are changing your host name, you must make sure that your host name is a name that is a fully qualified domain name. What do we mean by a fully qualified domain name? If you go to, you can just do a search for fully qualified domain name, FQDN, and you can check out the meaning of a fully qualified domain name. So a fully qualified domain name as a host name simply means you want a domain name or a subdomain name that is unique to your server. So for instance, I can just do, if I do edit for this host name, the primary domain name that I have is called mojoschool.club. So I can just choose a fully qualified domain name for this, for that particular domain. Remember, that domain must be registered, it must be active, everything must be working, and you must have created a control panel. You must have hosted the domain so the domain can be accessed. Remember that mojoschool.club, we can access it by, we created a username of Jojo for that particular domain. So let's just go to Jojo, and then we have a password for that domain. So that domain must already be hosted on your site. So I'm just going to log into that domain now. It must be hosted, it must be ready to go. If it's not hosted, please don't try to change host name. So what you want to do now is that you want to pick a unique name to become a host name. So you can see this is the mojoschool.club domain. You can see the name of the domain is mojoschool.club, and this is the IP address of the server. Right now you will see that this name servers are pointing to NS1 and NS2 Centos Web Panel. All these are things that we want to change so that it reflects your brand and your name. So the first thing we are going to change right now is that we are going to change the host name. Now when you get to this host name, what you want to do is that you want to type your domain name, which is mojoschool.club. You just want to put it there. Now, if a host name, a qualified host name, should have not just one dot, but should have two dots. So what you want to do is that you want to find a name. So I'm just going to use a name. Let me say hosting. You want to say hosting, or you want to say server. Anything can be your name as long as it's unique to that domain. So it will now be a subdomain of your main domain. So I'm going to say server, or let me say hosting dots. So you now have two dots. So hosting mojoschool.club, and then I'm just going to keep this. I'm going to copy this hosting part, and what you want to do is that you want to change host name. So you just click to change host name, and then you wait for that change to be updated. Now once you change that host name, don't forget that you have now changed something important on your server. So you need to go back to, okay, the host name has now been changed, and the next thing you now want to do is that you want to go back to your server here, and you want to go to your DNS functions. Very, very important. You want to go to your DNS function. So what you want to do now is that host name that you just changed, you want to add it here. So you are going to come to mojoschool.club, and you are going to add that host name. So if you look at it, if you look here now, you will see that there's nothing like hosting here. So what you want to do is you want to add it. So you are going to just say add type. So you are going to add an A record. Let me see, A record. You want to add an A record, and under the A record you want to put hosting. That's the record name will now be hosting, and under the IP address you want to put the IP address of that server. Okay, so you want to just do copy this IP address and just drop the IP address here, and you want to save that record. Now once you have saved that record, then your host name should be properly configured. So you want to wait for this record to be saved make sure that the record is saved, and you can see your DNS record is saved correctly and it's successful. So if you look in here now, you should see that record. Let me just go to the second page. You should see that record. You can see hosting is now created. So you go back here. Let me just refresh here. Continue. So that host name has now been set up. The next thing you now want to do is, let me go back to the home page of this, the dashboard. The next thing we want to do is that we want to now configure. Okay, let's advanced. Let's go to the unsafe site for now. I'm just going to use it as it is for now. Mojo School, hosting.mojoschool.com. Back to top. Where's my dashboard? Okay, so let's just now configure. Okay, it's coming up back now. So once you configure the host name, your host name will now be showing well. The next thing you now want to do, you can now see the host name has changed. You now have hosting.mojoschool.club. The next thing you want to do is that you want to change this name server to the name server on, you can see host name has been changed, host name has been changed. Good. You now want to change this name server to the name server of your primary domain. And the name server of your primary domain is ns1mojoschool.club. Remember, in the previous videos, we set up all of that. So the name server of the primary domain is ns1mojoschool.club. Let me just copy it from here so it's faster. So you have ns1.mojoschool.club. I'm just going to drop that here. And then the IP address, I want it to point back to this server's IP address. So I do that. And then ns2 will be the same thing, mojoschool.club. Remember, you must have registered your name server on your Dyna.account, and this setting is for your primary domain. So I'm just going to go ahead and save the change here. Okay. Yeah, so name servers has been updated. Now, once I am done with that, what I want to do next is I want to restart my DNS server. So I'm just going to go to the dashboard and I'm going to go to my DNS server, bind DNS server, and I'm going to restart the DNS server to make everything take effect. So now I have this host name, which is hosting.mojoschool.club. So let me just log out now. I'm just going to do a log out. Let me refresh here and let me see. Let me go back to the dashboard and let's see if that change has been effected. Has the change been effected? Yes. So you can now see that the name server here is now ns1.mojoschool.club, ns2.mojoschool.club. I have mojoschool.club. So I'm going to go back here, and this time around, instead of logging in with my IP address, I'm just going to use that domain, hosting.mojoschool.club. And I'm now going to say, give me the control panel, which is 2030, and I just go enter. Now you would now see that I am no longer using my IP address to log in. I am now using that domain, so I don't need to remember the IP address. And you can see, if you click here, you can see that the connection is secure. It has an SSL certificate and everything is working fine. So all you need to do now is remember that your domain is hosting, or your host name is hosting.mojoschool.club. And if you need to log into your admin, you just go to 2031, and it's the same thing. If you want to go here, you can always use the same thing here, or you can just use that domain name just like previously and just go mojoschool.club/cpanel, and everything should work fine. Okay, everything should work fine. So if you come here now, you can see that when you want to log into your admin panel, you can just use hosting.mojoschool.club 2031, and it will give you the same thing. So we are no longer logging in with the IP address. We don't need to remember the IP address. All we need to remember now is we need to remember the domain or the subdomain that we created. Okay, let me just log in again so that I'm sure everything is working fine. So we just need to log in using the subdomain that we just created, and you'll be able to log into your admin, and you can see hosting.mojoschool.club, and everything is working fine. So that's how to change your host name so that you no longer need to use the IP address of your server to log into your server. You can just use the host name to log into your server. And then when you now create domains, or when you host other people that is outside your own personal use, let's assume you have customers that you host, you can just give them this name server, ns1 mojoschool.club and ns2 mojoschool.club, and they can update the name server at their domain name, and that domain will be linked to their hosting account, and everything would work fine. Okay, we still have this issue of this PHP version 5.6 here. We tried to change it last time. It has not updated, but I believe you know the process. I'm just going to try it again now, and then in subsequent videos we'll just come back to see if the update has occurred. But I won't worry too much about that. I know it will work when you get to your live server. All you just need to do is the switch, and if it still doesn't work, don't worry about it. What you want to do is just wait until you have your premium license, and once you have your premium license, just come back and just do it again, and everything should work fine. So I'm going to stop this video now. In the next video we'll just go into this end user control panel, and we'll just look around the end user control panel a little bit. We want to look at our mail servers. We want to look at a little things here and there in the end user panel, so that I know I have covered that. Then in subsequent videos we'll pick on working with our FTP, and we'll probably now try to do a migration of our site. So if you have a cPanel site, how can you migrate your cPanel site from cPanel to Centos Web Panel? If you have a Webuzo site, how can you migrate your Webuzo site from your Webuzo account to your cPanel account? So we'll just take a look at that briefly, and once we are done with that, I think we must have covered almost everything we need to cover about you setting up your Centos Web Panel and getting up and going with it. So the next thing we'll do after that is now do a configuration of Hulk Messenger on top of Centos Web Panel, and once that is done, I want to believe that I've covered all bases and you can go on your own. So if you have clients already, you can now begin to migrate them from Webuzo to Centos Web Panel so that you can have a peace of mind. Then going forward, you can now begin to use Centos Web Panel for your new clients instead of using Webuzo or cPanel that is very expensive for them. Remember, one of the goals of all these things is to try as much as possible to bring down the cost of doing business. So we are trying to reduce the cost of doing business. That's one of our goals, and one of the best solutions we found so far now is combining our unmanaged VPS server, and that's why I'm taking the time to take you through Linux server management so that you are able to administer your own Linux servers yourself. So if you encounter a problem based on the background that I've given you, you can research online for how to solve those problems, and then you go into your Linux kernel or your terminal and you try to solve those problems by yourself. And once you have mastered how to do all these things, you can even start a service where you do installations and configurations and troubleshooting for other people on sites like Upwork, Fiverr, and even locally here, because you are now gaining the skills of a Linux server administrator. Now it may take some time for you to really become proficient, but if you practice it every day, you have all the resources to start with. If you practice every day, in a very short time, you would get proficient, and you will be able to sort all those things for yourself. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.